future can be prevented.
But if you want a revolution, return to your childhood and kick out the bottom. Be able to change your own internal structure. Walk down the street and flash lights in your head at children.
Welcome to October in the Railroad Earth. This is the 9th annual reading in memory of American novelist Jack Kerouac, who died in 1977 from the side effects of his favorite drug, alcohol. Reading for us tonight are Todd Walton, D.R.Wagner, Patrick Grizzell, and B.L. Kennedy. Introducing the readers tonight and providing historical anecdotes and footnotes is Victor Wong.
Tonight we want to introduce to you the snake oil salesmen of the Beat Generation. Yeah, what are their names anyway? There's D.R.Wagner, only surviving member of the 12 Disciples of Jesus. When the dogs of war come, why, he sprays the mace at them. Pat Grizzell, outpatient knight from Napa. B.L. Kennedy from Rikers Island. Poet for the criminally insane. There's Todd Walton, novelist, musician, lover of life. Lives in Sacramento when he's not working on the boat. He has an old chair that he sits at 19th and J. Watches the train goes by all the time, so his latest book is called Night Train. Other books, Louis and Women, Inside Moves, Forgotten Pulses, which he wrote when he was 4 years old. I present to you Mr. Todd Walton.
The Railroad Earth. There was a little alley in San Francisco back of the Southern Pacific Station at 3rd and Townsend. In red brick of drowsy, lazy afternoons, with everybody at work and offices in the air, you feel the impending rush of their commuter frenzy. As soon they'll be charging en masse from Market and Sansome buildings on foot and in buses, and all well-dressed through working man, Frisco of Waka. Truck drivers, and even the poor grime-bemarked 3rd Street of lost bums. Even Negroes so hopeless and long left east, and meanings of responsibility and try, that now all they do is stand there spitting in the broken glass, sometimes 50 in one afternoon, against one wall at 3rd and Howard. And here's all these Millbrae and San Carlos neat necktied producers and commuters of America and steel civilization rushing by with their San Francisco Chronicles and green call bulletins. Not even enough time to be disdainful. They've got to catch the 130, 132, 134, 136, all the way up to 146, till the time of evening supper in homes of the Railroad Earth, when high in the sky, the magic stars right above the following hotshot freight trains. It's all in California. It's all a sea.
Kerouac, when Kerouac was growing up, the American women did not smoke, did not drive a car, were homemakers taking care of the little fuckers, you know. Did not wear slacks or pants, little makeup, went to church a lot, took the children with her, she did, taking them through the sacraments. Chinese Americans, such as myself, were in the same station, not encouraged to write, thought of can't write. Few women at Kerouac's days were painters, the best only minor painters. And they were beginning to come out in the beat times. For instance, Professor Ruth Diamond of the San Francisco State College got money to start a poetry center. And at that Telegraph Hill Neighborhood Center had the master poet Vincent McHugh hold classes. And a lot of his students were women. Every month they held readings of work in progress. But the women never joined the ranks of the good old boys. Women had leads in the theater, but not in the arts. They did well in Hollywood. Same was true of the Chinese Americans, whose labor were mostly women, like laundry, kitchen, cleaning up. And women at that time began to live with their boyfriends. This is my old man. This is my old lady, that kind of stuff. And today, the number of women poets swell, and many in our midst today. But tonight, it's men's only. Well, let me talk a little bit about the beat generation, the arts, that is. If you follow the arts, when the beat was in its height, you know, Bill Wiley and Don Hudson were students at the San Francisco Art Institute, called the San Francisco School of Fine Arts at the time, on the Gurdon Woods. And I was a student there, too, with them. There was Deben Corn and Elmer Bischoff were the teachers, Jeremy Anderson, Nathan Olivera, Manuel Neri. Wow, what a bunch. The only women artists known was Joan Brown, and then the older Emmylou Packard. Art was not a major voice in that time. As a matter of fact, they isolated themselves a lot, painting abstracts. Sometimes I see de Kooning when I would go pick up my kit, too, at the Union Street Nursery School where Rhoda Kellogg had her nursery. But it was the gang with the words that led at that time. I used to be assistant librarian at the Art Institute, and all these people that I talked about, like Bill Wiley and Don Hudson, they used to be security guards at the Playland. If you remember the Playland down at the beach, you know, with all the roller coasters and everything. They had the graveyard shift, you know, because that's how they made money to go to school. And then I would open the library at 9 o'clock, and they would come in, you know, really cold and everything. And, you know, the Ann Brammer Library at the Art Institute was, you know, it was a wealthy school, so they had a lot of these leather couches, and the guys would just flop down. And they would tell me when their first classes, and I would wake them up, and they would go to their classes. The music of the times were like modern jazz quartet, Brubeck, Carmen McRae, Pony Poindexter, Flip Nunez, modern jazz quartet. And there was a craze for Lead Belly and Josh White. Stan Wilson played at the original Hungry Eye, stayed at the Colombo Hotel. And their living room was Mike's Bull Hall, City Lights Bookstore, Vesuvio's. Someone from that time, that is of that art, and yet who went also into poetry, I'd like to present D.R.Wagner.
Charlie Parker looked like Buddha. Charlie Parker, who recently died laughing at a juggler on TV after weeks of strain and sickness, was called a perfect musician. And the expression on his face was a calm, beautiful, and profound as the image of the Buddha represented in the East. The lidded eyes, the expression that says, all is well. This is what Charlie Parker said when he played, all is well. He had the feeling of early in the morning, like a hermit's joy, or like the perfect cry of some wild gang at a jam session, wail, whop. Charlie burst his lungs to reach the speed of what the speedsters wanted, and what they wanted was his eternal slow down. A great musician, a great creator of forms that ultimately find expression in mores and what have you, musically as important as Beethoven, yet not regarded as such at all, a genteel conductor of string orchestras, in front of which he stood, proud and calm, like a leader of music in the great historic world night. and wailed his little saxophone, the alto, with piercing, clear lament in perfect tune and harmony, toot, as listeners reacted without showing it and began talking, and soon the whole joint's rocking, and everybody's talking, and Charlie Parker whistling them on to the brink of eternity with his Irish St. Patrick poodle stick. And like the holy piss, we blop and we plop in the waters of slaughter, and white meat and die, one after one. And how sweet a story it is when you hear Charlie Parker tell it, either on records or at sessions or at official bits in clubs, shots in the arm for the wallet. Gleefully, he whistled the perfect horn. Anyhow, it made no difference. Charlie Parker, forgive me. Forgive me for not answering your eyes, for not having made an indication of that which you can devise. Charlie Parker, pray for me. Pray for me and everybody. In the nirvanas of your brain where you hide, indulgent and huge, no longer Charlie Parker, but the secret unsayable name that carries with it merit, not to be measured from here to up, down, east, or west. Charlie Parker, lay the bane off me and everybody. So he loved that musician tremendously, and he was a funny man. He could get people laughing, and he could be as silly as the next guy, and sillier a lot of the times. And this little series of choruses here sort of proves it. It's called Goofing at the Table. Goofing at the Table. You just don't know. What don't I know? How good this ham and eggs is. If you had any idea whatsoever how good this is, then you would stop writing poetry and dig in. It's been so long since I've been hungry, it's a miracle. Ah, boy, but them bacon and them egg. Mr. Beggar and Mrs. Davy, Looney and Crooney. I made a poem out of it. Haven't smoked Looney and Crooney in a long time. Dem eggs and dem dare bacon's baby. If you'd only lay that down on a trumpet. Lay that down solid, brother, about all them bacon and eggs. You got to be able to lay it down solid. All that Looney and Frooney, Frakins, Akins, and Begs. Lay it all, be boppy, be buddy. I didn't took, I could think so, be bo, be boppy, Looney and Junie, if this is the way they get kind of hysterical. Looney and Booney, Junior and Mooner, Moon, Spoon, and June. Don't they call them cat men that lay it down on the trumpet? The orgasm of the moon and the June. I call them cat things. That's really cute, isn't it? William Carlos Williams.
Well, Jack Kerouac and his gang inspired people to the brave new world and to write about their experience. The times of the beats were a time of celebration of the arts. In those days, the word was, don't be a debutante. I mean, don't dabble, plunge in. It's your bag, man. Dig it. And Kerouac hardly disapproved of the hippies for being too drugged out, too much spectators, not productive as he and Ginsberg and Corso and Kaufman and Ferlinghetti. I mean, they were men with PhDs and they strove to be published. They had that urgency that they had something to say. They had been enlightened, a gift of the gods. After all, a poet is not someone who becomes an English major, picks up the pen and writes and has the ego and spunk to get up before an audience and read his own poetry. He is created to hear the spirit who speaks of where have you been and where are you going, you know. The poet readies himself and waits, and when the whistle of the train comes, he runs to the station, as Faulkner said, runs alongside, and as his story is called out, writes down fast and furiously. The train only slows down and never stops, and never comes back this way again.
First everyone looked around and then it happened. Bop happened. The bird flew in minds and went out on the street. Thousands of new tight het cats in red shirts and some goatees and strange queer-looking cowboys from the west with boots and belts, and girls began to disappear from the streets. You no longer saw, as in the 30s, the wrangler walking with his doll in a honky-tonk. Now he was alone, re-bop, bop, to being, because the broads were leaving the guys and going off to be mindless models. Dizzy or Charlie or Thelonious was walking down the street, heard a noise, a sound. Half Lester Young, half raw, rainy fog. That was just shivering excitement with shack, track, empty lot. The sudden vast tiger head on the wood fence, rainy, no school, Saturday morning dump yards. Hey! And rushed off dancing on the piano that night. Thelonious introduced a wooden off-key note to everybody's warm-up notes. Minton's Playhouse. Evening starts, jam hours later, 10 p.m., colored bar and hotel next door. 1 or 2 white visitors, some from Columbia, some from nowhere, some from ships, some from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, some from Europe. The strange note makes the trumpeter of the band lift an eyebrow. Dizzy is surprised. For the first time that day, he puts the trumpet to his lips and blows a wet blur. Laughs Parker, bending down to slap his ankle, puts his old note to his mouth and says, "Didn't I tell ya, didn't I tell ya?" With jazz of notes talking eloquent like old ancient poets of foreign languages, singing in foreign countries, by seas, and no one understands because the language isn't alive. Ah, it isn't alive in the land yet. Bop is the language from America's inevitable Africa. Going sounded like gong. Africa is the name of the flute and kick beat. Off to one side, the sudden squeak, unhindered that sounds muffled at any moment from Dizzy Gillespie's trumpet. Do anything you want, drawing the tune aside. Along another improvisation bridge with reach out care of claws. Why be false? The band of 10 p.m. Minton swings into action. Bird Parker, who is only 18 years old, has a crew cut of Africa looks. Impossible, has perfect eyes, the composure of a king. When suddenly you stop and look at him in the subway and you can't believe the bop is here to stay. It is real. Negroes in America are just like us, and we must look at them understanding the exact racial counterpart of what man is, and figure it with histories and lost kings of immemorable tribes in Africa. Small towns and otherwise, the sad mutt sleeping on old porches. Big woods where just 90 years ago, Bruce came calling Ma to the fence. He'd just deserted the Confederate Army and was running home for pone and flies on watermelon porches. And educated judges in horn-rimmed glasses reading the Amsterdam News. The band realized the goof of life. That it made them be not only misplaced in white nation, but misnoticed for what they really were. And the goof they felt stirring and springing in their bellies. Suddenly, Dizzy spats his lips tight, drum together, and drives the high, screeching, fantastic gear. Clear note that has everybody in the joint looking up, bird lips hanging dully to hear the turning slowly in a circle, waiting for Diz to swim through the wave of the tune in a toneless, complicated wave of his own. Grim like factories and atonal at any minute, and the logic of the mad. The sock of his belly is sweet. The rock zunga munga boom bam bang is white creamed afternoons. A bluebird had leaned back dreamily in eternity as Dizzy outlined to him the importance of becoming an angel in order to give a solid basis to his race. To their ceremony. Make that rug swing, mother. When you say race, bow your head and close your eyes. Give them religion, no Uncle Tom Baptist. Make them waters of skull caps of respectable shadows in actual New York, picking hashy dates from their teeth. Give them new names with Zunga sounds, make it weird. Thelonious was so weird, he wandered the twilight streets of Harlem in winter, no hat on here, sweating, blowing fog in his head. He heard it all ringing often. He heard whole choruses by Lester. There was a strange English kid hanging around Minton's who stumbled along the sidewalk carrying Lester in his head too. Hours of hundreds of developing choruses in regular beat all day, so in the subway no dissonance could crash against the unalterable choruses in implacable bars erected in the mind's foundation, jazz. The tune they were playing was All the Things You Are. They slowed it down and dragged behind it with half-tempo dinosaur proportions, changed the placing of the note in the middle of the harmony to the outer, more precarious sounds, positions where also its sense of not belonging was enhanced by the general atonality produced with everyone. The tune's harmony, the clunk of bilineal piano like anvils, blow, said Diz, and Charlie Parker came in for his solo with squeaky, innocent cry, monk, punch, anguish, numb fingers crawling at the keyboard to tear up foundation and guts of jazz from big master box to make Charlie Parker hear his cry and sigh, to jar the orchestra into vibrations, to elicit gloom from the doom of the black piano. He stared down, wild eyes at his keys like a matador at the bull's head. Drunken figures shaded in the weaving background. Tottering the boys didn't care. On cold corners they stood, three backs to one, another facing all the wind-spent lips don't care. Miserable, cold, broke, waiting like witch doctors, saying everything belongs to me because I am poor. Like 12th century monks high in winter belfries of Gothic organ, they, wild-eyed, were listening to their own wild sound, which was heralding a new age of music that would eventually require symphonies, schools, centuries of technique, declines and falls of master-ripe styles. The Dixieland of Louis Armstrong, 16 in New Orleans. And a big pup Boris Niggerlips Jim in the white shirt wailing at big sacred bass in raunchy, gaunchy New Orleans on South Rampart Street, famous for parades, all Perdido Street, all that was mud in the river Mississippi, pass of 1910 gold rings, derby hats of workers, horses, steaming turds near breweries and saloons. Soon enough of it would leap and fill the gay 20s like champagne in a glass pop and crawl up to the 30s with tired Rudy Valleys lamenting what Lewis had laughed in the 20s, transoceanic jazz, sick and tired, early Ethel Mermans and old beat bed springs cracking in stormy weather blues when people lie in bed all day and moan and had it good. The world of the United States was tired of being poor and low and gloomy in a line. Swing erupted, the Depression began to crack. It was the year marijuana was made illegal, 1937. Young teenagers took to the first, the second, the third. Some still wandered on hobo trains. Lost boys of the 30s, numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Salvation armies put up full houses every night. Some were 10 years old. Teenagers alienated from their parents who have suddenly returned to work. And for good, to get rid of that damn old mud of the river and tear the rose vine off the porch and paint the porch white and cut the trees down and castrate the hedges, burn the leaves, build the wire fence, get up the antenna, listen, the alienated teenager in the 20th century finally writes, gone wild to be rich. No more just around the corner became the hepcap, the jitterbug, and smoked the new law weed. World War II gave everybody 2 puffs of butter in the morning on a service tray, including your sister, up from tired, degrading swing, wondering what happened between 1937 and 1945. And because the army worked it, and it, played it to the boys in North Africa and ragged it in Piccadilly bars, the Andrews sisters put the corn on the can, swing with its heroes died, and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk, who were hustled through the chow lines, came back remembering old goofs and tried it again, and zup! Dizzy screamed, Charlie squealed, Monk crashed, the drummer kicked, dropped the bomb, the bass question mark, plunk, and off they wailed on salt peanut, jumping like the mad monkeys on the new air. Pork pie, hey, pork pie, and skidly wada boo ba, da 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 boo da 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 ba doo. They came into their own, they jumped and they had jazz and took it in their hands and saw its history and development and turned it to their way use and heavily carried it, clanking like posts across the enormity of a new world philosophy. And a new, strange, and crazy grace came over them, fell from the air free. They saw pity in the whole of heaven, hell in their hearts. Billie Holiday had rocks in her heart. Lester Droopy, pork-pied, hung his horn and blew bop. Crazy ideas inside jazz had every day dreaming. Miles Davis leaning against the piano, fingering his trumpet with a cigarette hand, working, making raw iron sound like wood, speaking in long sentences like Marcel Cruz. Hey, Jim and the stud come swinging down the streets and says he's real bent, he's down, and he has a twisted face. He works, he wails, he bops, he bangs. The man who was sent stoned and stabbed is now down, bent and stretched out. He is home at last. His music is here to stay. His history is washed over us. His imperialistic kingdoms are coming.
Because under Bixby Creek was this cabin where about a mile from the ocean that Ferlinghetti had. And the next morning, after we had all gotten drunk the night before, I got up early too, only to find Kerouac sitting on a two-seater outhouse, you know, the side by side. And he was naked, you know, and so I got to see what he looked like. He kind of about the size of Pat Grizzell here, except that he was quite burly because he played center for Columbia University, you know. Quite burly guy. He shaved, and he didn't, though he had a lot of hair, he had to shave about 3 times a day, which we kind of laughed at because, you know, this hair of mine that I have and all this, it took me a year to grow. And normally I would shave about once a month. But here he had to shave in the morning, by lunchtime he was full growth already, and then 5 o'clock shadow, you know, and nighttime he had to go out, you know, get down. He had to shave again, so. But he was very big bone guy, and he had hair on his back, on his shoulder. I asked him whether I could touch him, you know, but it was just so strange, and he had hair all the way down to his, you know what, and it had some on his butt too, it is. Hair on his arms. He had a big dick too. And as we worked ourselves down, I think he made good use of it. He had hairy legs, you know, even to his toes. He was a very hairy guy.
It's all a sea. I swim out of it in the afternoons of sun-hot meditation in my jeans with head on handkerchief on brakeman's lantern, or if not working, on books. I look up at blue sky of perfect lost purity and feel the warp of wood of old America beneath me, and have insane conversations with Negroes in several-story windows above, and everything is pouring in the switching moves of boxcars in that little alley which is so much like the alleys of Lowell, and I hear far off in the sense of coming night that engine calling our mountains. But it was that beautiful cut of clouds I could always see above the little SP alley, puffs floating by from Oakland or the Gate of Marin to the north or San Jose south. Clarity of Cal will break your heart. It was the fantastic drowse and drum hum of Lum Mum afternoons, nothing to do. Old Frisco with end-of-land sadness. The people. The alley full of trucks and cars of business nearabouts, and nobody knew or far from cared who I was all my life. 3,500 miles from Berthoud opened up and at last belonged to me in great America.
I was abiding in the dreary bliss of eternity. Crash. Sometimes I thought about California and Gary, and whither among the drizzly suburban palms was the mystery being answered here. Then I began reading Shakespeare and all those divine lines like, my reformation glittering over my fault. And I saw my reformation completed. In a dream, I heard the words, pain, 'tis but a concubine's puff. But in Shakespeare it would say, aye, by my faith, that bears a frosty sound. Then suddenly one night after supper, as I was pacing in the cold, windy darkness of the yard, I felt tremendously depressed and threw myself right on the ground and cried, I'm gonna die. Because there was nothing else to do in the cold loneliness of this harsh, inhospitable earth, and instantly the tender bliss of enlightenment was like milk in my eyelids, and I was warm. And I realized that this was the truth Natalie knew now, and all the dead, my dead father and dead brother and dead uncles and cousins and aunts, the truth that is realizable in a dead man's bones and is beyond the tree of Buddha as well as the cross of Jesus. Believe that the world is an ethereal flower and ye live. I knew this. I also knew that I was the worst bum in the world. The diamond light was in my eyes. My cat meowed at the icebox, anxious to see what all the good dear delight was. I fed him. I suddenly felt the desire to write to Philip Whalen, who was strong in my thoughts now as I recalled his modesty and general silence among the vain screams of myself and Alan and Gary. Yes, Whalen, it's a shining nowness, and we've done it, carried America like a shining blanket into that brighter nowhere. Already. But I knew that was silly words. The answer from the stars is indeed, withheld invincibly, as Dickinson says, that lonely woman of New England 100 years ago who had said, maybe Eden ain't so lonesome as New England used to be, and I shook from the cold to read it. What are you trying to do, Kerouac? I'd ask myself in my sleeping bag at night. Trying to deny reality with all this Buddha stuff, you jerk? Poor, detailed, immaculate, incarnate fool, and you call yourself self? Take off your coat, crash wits. And I realized that all this Buddhism was a strain at telling the untellable emptiness, yet that nothing was true or a perfect paradox. I wanted to hear what Gary Snyder had to say now. During that winter, he himself was living a cold life in a small shack in Marin County on top of a windy hill by a wood stove, reading and studying the sutras like me, writing poems like me, but chopping wood, getting water, trimming his oil lamp. He wrote and invited me to come and stay there whenever I wanted. Meanwhile, my meditations and studies began to bear fruit. It really started late in January, one frosty night in the woods. In the dead silence, it seemed I almost heard the words said, "Everything is all right forever and forever and forever." I let out a big whoo! 1 o'clock in the morning, the dogs leaped up and exulted. I felt like yelling it to the stars. I clasped my hands and prayed, "O wise and serene spirit of awakenerhood, everything's all right forever and forever, and thank you, thank you, thank you, amen." What I care about the tower of ghouls, sperm and bones and dust? I felt free, and therefore I was free. It began to get warm in February, and the ground began to melt a little, and the nights in the woods were milder, my sleeps on the porch more enjoyable. The stars seemed to get wet in the sky, bigger. Under the stars, I'd be there dozing cross-legged under my tree, and in my half-sleep mind, I'd be saying, "Moab? Who is Moab?" And I'd wake up with a burr in my hand, a cotton burr off one of the dogs. So awake, I'd make thoughts like, it's all different appearances of the same thing. My drowsiness, the burr, Moab, all one ephemeral dream. All belongs to the same emptiness. Glory be. Then I'd run these words through my mind to train myself. I am emptiness. I am not different from emptiness. Neither is emptiness different from me. Indeed, emptiness is me. There'd be a puddle of water with a star shining in it. I'd spit in the puddle. The star would be obliterated. I'd say, "That star is real?" I wasn't exactly unconscious of the fact that I had a good warm fire to return to after these midnight meditations, provided kindly for me by my brother-in-law, who was getting a little sick and tired of my hanging around not working. Once I told the famous saying about how you go through suffering. He said, "If you go through suffering by this time, it ought to be as big as the goddamn side of the house." There were now early spring mornings and the happy dogs, me forgetting the path of Buddhism and just being glad, looking around at those new little birds, not yet summer fat, the dogs yawning and almost swallowing my dharma, the grass waving, hens chuckling, and at night under a big fat moon I think, "Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord without end, great reality of emptiness, all is well without end, all is ecstasy, all is brightly perfect," which it was for me, but not for somebody else. One night I realized I had a strange vision in the woods. Just as I sat down, I instantly began radiating. And I remember the words, "Matter in great universe is an illusion of mortal mind." And I saw the big gray spectral scenery of the one vast emptiness shifting in my mind like shrouds, hazes, smoke, clouds, dream drapes, great sea shroud gloop curtains rising and rearranging, visions in the form of cities, men's, planet, turtles, chilocosms against or within, a clear backdrop of pure mind, all of it one perfect empty truth that cannot be cut up and arranged into a system. Everywhere the one great flower which is not a flower. Days tumbled on days. I was in my overalls, didn't comb my hair, didn't shave much, consorted only with dogs and cats. I was living the happy life of childhood again. Now I felt I really had something to tell Gary, and I was looking forward to my trip back west. I felt I had made it into the shining ocean. I even began to experience what is called samapati, which in Sanskrit means transcendental visits. I get a little drowsy in the mind, but somehow physically wide awake, sitting erect under my tree, and suddenly will be dreaming of whole walls of salmon-colored flowers, or a sudden purple light in the woods, or the sudden fragrance of flowers and no flowers, just pine there, or find myself listening to a discourse on the truth by some ghostly preacher in some other part of the universe. When I go to the country store to buy bread and milk, the old boys sitting around there, bamboo poles and molasses barrels, say, "What do you do in the woods?" "I just go there to study." "Ain't you kind of old to be a college student?" "Well, I just go in there sometimes and just sleep." But I watched them rambling around the fields all day looking for something to do so their wives would think they were real busy, hard-working men. They weren't fooling me either. I knew they secretly wanted to sleep in the woods too, or just sit and do nothing in the woods like I wasn't too ashamed to do. They never bothered me. How could I tell them that my knowing was the knowing that the substance of my bones and their bones and the bones of dead men in the earth or rain at night is the common individual substance that is everlastingly tranquil and blissful? Whether they believed it or not makes no difference. One night in my rain cape, I sat in regular downpour and I had a little song to go with the pattering rain on my rubber hood. Raindrops are ecstasy. Raindrops are not different from ecstasy. Neither is ecstasy different from raindrops. Yeah, ecstasy is raindrops. Rain on, O cloud. So what did I care what the old tobacco-chewing stick whittlers at the crossroads store had to say about my mortal eccentricity? We all get to be gum and graves anyway. Strangely enough, I even got a little drunk with one of the old men one time, went driving around the country roads, and I actually told him how I was sitting out in the woods meditating, and he really rather understood and said he would like to try that if he had the time, or if he could get enough nerve. And he had a little rueful envy in his voice. Everybody knows everything. Spring came after heavy rains had washed everything. Brown puddles were everywhere in moist, sere fields. Strong, warm winds whipped snow-white clouds across the sun and dry air. Golden days with beauteous moons at night, warm. One emboldened frog picking up a croak song at 11 p.m. in Buddha Creek, where I'd established my new straw sitting place under a twisted twin tree by a little opening in the pines and a dry stretch of grass and a tiny brook. There one day, my brother, little Paul, came with me, and I took an object from the ground and raised it silently, sitting under the tree, and little Paul, facing me, asked, "What's that?" And I said, "That," and made a leveling motion with my hand saying, "Tafatha," repeating, "That, it's that." And then only when I told him it was a pine cone did he make the imaginary judgment of the word pine cone, for indeed, as it says in the sutra, emptiness is discrimination. And he said, my head jumped out and my brain went crooked, and then my eyes started looking like cucumbers, and my hair cowlicked on it, and the cowlick licked my chin. And then he said, why don't I make up a poem? He wanted to commemorate the moment. Okay, but make it up right away, just as you go along. Okay, the pine trees are waving, the wind is trying to whisper something, the birds are saying drip, 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 and the hawks are going hark, hark, hark. Oh, we're in for danger. Why? Hawk, hark, hark, hark. Then what? Hark, hark, nothing. I puffed on my silent pipe, peace and quiet in my heart. I called my new grove Twin Tree Grove because of the two tree trunks I leaned against that wound around each other, white spruce shining white in the night and showing me from hundreds of feet away where I was heading, although old Bob the bird dog whitely showed me the way down the dark path. On that path one night I lost my juju prayer beads Gary had given me, but the next day I found them right in the path, figuring the Dharma can't be lost. Nothing can be lost on a well-worn path. Spring nights, practicing dhyana under the cloudy moon. Long afternoons the next day just sitting in the straw until I was tired of thinking nothing and just going to sleep and having little flash dreams like the strange one I had once of being in some kind of gray, ghostly attic hauling up suitcases of gray meat my mother is handing up, and I'm petulantly complaining, I won't come down to do this work of the world. I felt I was a blank being called upon to enjoy the ecstasy of the endless true body. I had frogs in the little brook that kept croaking at the oddest times, interrupting my meditations as if by design. Once at high noon, the frog croaked 3 times and was silent the rest of the day, as though expounding me the triple vehicle. Under the moon, I'd see the truth. Here, this is it. The world as it is nirvana. I'm looking for a heaven outside what there is. It's only this poor, pitiful world that's heaven. Ah, if I could only realize, if I could forget myself and devote my meditations to the freeing, the awakening, and the blessedness of all living creatures everywhere, I'd realize what there is ecstasy.
You know, for a long time as I was growing up, nothing changed. Then all of a sudden there was the Second World War, and America never went back to the good old days because it become the bad old days. And Jack Kerouac knew that, you know. And so he went on the road looking at that new world that rose out from the ashes of a world that had blown to bits. And one of the places that they nested, you know, kind of while they were traveling was in North Beach, which was quite the place to be because it was the Italian district that had previously sheltered the Bohemians. And, you know, the Italians were the Renaissance master. No wonder they could, you know, sustain people like Jack Kerouac himself. And he was very much like this, as you are here, crowded, you know, toe to toe, dressed not as good as you are today. But the only difference is that you drink a lot more than you are now. I mean, I don't hear clinks of glasses at all. And I think that, you know, you shouldn't feel so that you can't stand up in front of somebody while the reading is going on, go to the back to L and the lady and says, I want a beer, or something like that, you know, and have a good time tonight, because this is a time of celebration.
Now it's night in 3rd Street. The keen little neons and also yellow bulb lights of impossible to believe flops, with dark ruined shadows moving back of torn yellow shades like a degenerate China with no money. The cat's in Annie's alley. The flop comes on, moans, rolls. The street is loaded with darkness. Blue sky above with stars, hanging high over old hotel roofs, and blowers of hotels moaning out dusts of interior. The grime inside, the word and mouths falling out tooth by tooth. The reading rooms, tick-tock, big clock, with creaked chair and slanting boards and old faces, looking up over rimless spectacles, bought in from some West Virginia or Florida or Liverpool, England pawn shop long before I was born. And across rains, they've come to the end of the land sadness, end of the world gladness. All you San Franciscos will have to fall eventually and burn again.
An exterminating Messiah. It came from outer space with love. The first and the last, born on the edge of empty words, an advocate of glass skulls coiled, spitting like a snake or biological forced entry, from aborted journals and sliced scream. The house to the west, in which nothing ever happens, is obscene, and has many exits filled with suspected parasite, who scorched the umbilical cord with alien communication. In the beginning was the word, but only the blind could hear it. And it can't return home, evaporating into the heart as the heart does the mind. It belongs to those whose sins will never be atoned. Oh, Patrick, this is the truth. Those wise like stars blast the chakras of raw sky seconds before your eyes open to receive the seed of night. Some say poetry was born when Lucifer departed and told God to piss off. In the beginning, there was the word.
The streets filled up with songs. The moon kisses my brands. I see the flutter in the night sky. Hold 3 small birds in my hands. My mouth wandering off into piles of words. The way the light spread across the sky moved questions among the clouds. I made a list. Why take a chance? Why do anything you don't know about? Why fall in love and commit yourself? Why say, yes, I will trust? Why be true to anything? Before the night, hands clenched, making names at the sky, I listened to Kerouac's voice, all crystal and snapping around the edges of time. Little chatterings of other voices, fouling into accents, easy as New England and smaller. The thoughts seemed so heavy that my eyes filled with tears and spilled, but in laugh and felt like Buddhist saint, all dumb in myself, not making sense out of 5 o'clock. We spread legs like wings and arch backs like trumpet coils. Somewhere they grind the edges off of life. A room, perhaps. When I listen close at the moments, I can hear them idling the engine, running.
Okay, so that's the first part of our program. Yeah. Let's drink up now. Come on.
Hey, this is one of the best ones we had. I'm having fun.
You're watching